recently, I've seen multiple videos, mainly by Americans, discussing French clothing brands. And their discussion mainly centers around how French clothing brands cut their clothes and their view that when it all comes down to it, French clothing brands are actually made for just French women, aka women who are slim and have no curves. As an American who has lived in Paris now for over 4 years, I can tell you 100% that the French body type is completely overblown and actually has kind of a dark side to it. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the French body type and why it is absolutely something that you should not aspire to by any stretch of the imagination. And before we get into it, I do want to note that some of the topics we're going to be discussing in today's video are going to be a little bit sensitive and thus may not be appropriate for younger audiences. That said, let's get into it. First and foremost, we have to start by separating French from Parisian. So one of the things you'll note is that when you go into the French countryside, you will definitely see people who are overweight. Why? Well, it's largely due to the diet. The food is very heavy with butters and creams. Each meal lasts 4 hours or longer, and then you go out, take a little walk, and start the next meal again. There is substantially less walking, and I know, for example, that if I happen to live in the countryside, I would end up gaining at least 10 kilos or 20 pounds without really doing much, without making an actual conscious effort to work out. I know that that's just how quickly I would put on weight. So as a result, it's not that it is all of France, all French people who are slim. Really, it's just something that's more centered in Paris. Now that might have you asking, well, is it then the walking that keeps Parisians slim? It's not that. Let me explain why. Okay, so if it's not the walking that keeps everybody a little bit slim who lives in the city, what exactly is it? Do you think it could be the working out? Again, not so much. It is probably not working out that actually keeps people slim here. First and foremost, working out in Paris is actually quite difficult to do. There are very limited public spaces that are free spaces for exercise or playing games. Really, the only space you're going to see where it's just free to access and play something is going to be pétanque. But other than that, unlike in America where we have free golf courses, tennis courts, basketball courts, etc., you're not going to see that in France. You're not even going to see, free accessible soccer fields for kids. Instead, generally what you see is people playing soccer just in the park with their friends or family or whatnot. But even then, don't expect it to be something like what you would see in the US on a US soccer field. In addition to most sport activities actually being quite difficult to access due to money, they're also quite difficult to access due to, frankly, just your ability to get there. So let's say you do have the money to pay for the tennis court, and you do have the money to pay to access the soccer field. You have to generally have a car or some other means to get very, very far. Those things are not actually located within Paris. One of the things I think that is very interesting about living in Washington, D.C., even New York, is that you will find golf courses on the island of Manhattan. You will find a golf course in the middle of D.C. You will not find anything like that in Paris. These are things that you have to kind of go to. You have to find them out. And that, I think, makes it very difficult to access. Now, the one sport that I will say that it is very easy for most people to access here is swimming. So almost every single neighborhood has a public pool, and the pools are actually quite accessible and reasonably priced to access. So as far as accessing a pool, that you'll see a lot of people do. And you see a lot of people take up sports that do involve things like swimming and whatnot. In addition to the fact that working out is quite difficult in Paris, I've also heard quite a few stories from French friends about their mothers reproaching them for putting on muscles or looking like they even have muscles. So for example, one of my friend's friends, she said that her mother, when she came back from the US, basically said, "Oh my gosh, those muscles on your body are ugly. You look like an American. You need to get rid of that immediately or you won't be able to find a man." I was like, oh my gosh, like how intense. So having a muscular build, having any sort of muscles, is really kind of frowned upon in at least amongst the women in French culture. And so as a result, you see a lot of women doing things like swimming, Pilates, yoga, in order to kind of maintain this light dancer's physique that is really very much desired or considered desirable, particularly here in Paris. However, swimming, yoga, Pilates, that's really not enough only to keep you slim and to maintain this featherweight physique. So how is it that French women do this? Well, I'm about to tell you. As you may know, the only way to lose weight, or in fact to maintain your weight, is to live with a calorie deficit. And what does that mean? Well, that basically means that you are consuming fewer calories, generally through food, than you are burning, generally through exercise, in a day on kind of a consistent basis. However, if you are not maintaining that calorie deficit by working out and by burning it through exercise, then how exactly are you maintaining it? Well, the only other way to do it is by decreasing what you eat. In the August 9, 2022 episode of the podcast Maintenance Phase, which I will link to below, the host discussed a book called How French Women Don't Get Fat, that was written by a French woman. And in the podcast, I'm going to read directly what it says. In the podcast, the host discussed the supposed dieting book and ultimately conclude that in reality, it's not as much a dieting book as a how-to guide for an eating disorder. And that brings me to my first ugly truth on how French women actually manage to stay slim. It is oftentimes via eating disorders. I actually had a very personal and very up-close exposure to this when I was living in my very first apartment in Paris due to my neighbor. My neighbor, a young woman who could not have been a day older than 25, suffered from an eating disorder, and it was quite severe. And ultimately, she actually ended up taking her own life because of that disease and just because of what it was doing to her body, and just her general mental health. I have to say that it substantially affected me, and it was the first time that I really saw how this pressure in French society, and particularly when it comes to women and staying slim, how this pressure really does play out in real life. And I gotta say, it's something you don't want to see. It's truly, absolutely nothing that you ever want to aspire to. Every single person, man and woman, that I know in Paris has a story about somebody that they know who has an eating disorder. It is just that common. And they talk about how, oh yes, she uses her eating disorder as a way to stay slim. Think about that. It's so common. Every single person knows somebody like this. That is truly disturbing. I have personally witnessed how much French people love leek soup and love to kind of use it as something to stay slim. Now, if you don't know what leek soup is, I'll just say that you should listen to the podcast episode, because they definitely kind of explain how this is something that was used to kind of lose weight. But leek soup is awful. Leek soup tastes like gruel. I imagine that leek soup is what they were giving to Oliver Twist. I recently read this blog post where this woman said that she was in Paris and she watched this French woman eat 3 fries, and she thought it was so elegant the way that she ate those 3 fries. Let me be clear. That woman probably ate those 3 fries and then didn't eat anything else the rest of the day. There is nothing elegant about that. This is not just a situation where they indulge one day and then cut back a little bit the next day. No, no, no. This is a society where people are so repulsed by anyone who is fat that they refuse to make clothes for people, and instead just expect women to do whatever they have to do to stay slim. That is not normal. One of my French friends is a teacher in a French high school, and she told me that clearly it's about a third of the girls in the class at any given time are suffering from some sort of eating disorder because they are trying to stay slim to fit into an image. There is nothing healthy or good about that. That's why I say that the French body type is not something that you should be aspiring to, because the way that the women are maintaining it is via eating disorders, and that is going to wreak havoc on their bodies in the long run. Now, one thing I want to note is that the quality of the food in France is actually better than what you'll generally find in the US. So for example, when you go to McDonald's in France, you actually get real meat and real potatoes. With that being said, you'll see a lot of Americans who come and they're going to drop 10, 20 pounds just like that. And that's simply due to a shift in the food. In America, there is sugar and crap in all of our food. In France, not so. However, for a French person, they're accustomed to eating like this, so the way that we eat here in France isn't necessarily going to cause them to stay slim or help them lose weight. So as a result, they're not going to be able to simply rely on, changing their diet like you might do in the US as a way to lose weight. Instead, it has to be, frankly, cutting out food entirely. So that brings us to the second way that French women stay slim. And you might be wondering, can it get worse? Oh, darling, it can. So the second ugly truth on how French women actually stay slim is due to vaping and cigarettes. Yes, another incredibly unhealthy way of staying slim. I'm going to be frank, I really do not understand how cigarettes or vaping or anything like that keeps women slim. But I can tell you that I have seen kids who look as young as 12 smoking. And it's just like, what? And yet they're sitting there outside of high school smoking away like it's no big deal. Again, my French friend who is a teacher tells me that kids start smoking incredibly young here and that she knows a whole lot of the girls who smoke as a way to stay slim. And while these views on staying slim really do affect the French female psyche, I will note that they also affect the French male psyche. I've talked a lot about how my boyfriend will just casually mention, oh, I'm not going to eat for a couple days. And then he'll tell me I need to join him in solidarity. And I'm just like, bro, no. In my opinion, and I am just not going to hide this, I think that the French view on weight and size is incredibly problematic. I think that it is incredibly traumatizing and deeply affects this society. Instead, I think what you need to focus on is developing a healthier relationship to food, developing a healthier relationship to your own body, that sort of thing. Instead of sitting here and kind of forcing people to starve themselves or take on other unhealthy habits in order to fit into clothing that's literally made for like the bodies of 10 people. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I've been talking about how I need to lose some kilos. And the way that I'm doing that is through the non-sexy, grueling, hard way of just frankly working out. I'm working out, I'm eating better, I'm cutting out my candy, even though we all know I love my candy. I am really focusing on trying to just maintain a healthy calorie deficit by cutting out the junk food that is in my diet right now. And that's what I believe that this culture and society should actually encourage people to do, is to go about it the hard way, the non-sexy way, the slow way, which is by watching what you eat and then just being mindful of how much exercise you're getting. And also, I think there needs to be some normalization of women's bodies and just understanding that the physique you might have when you're 12 is not going to be the same physique you have when you're 18. Like hormones. Va-va-voom. It happens to us all. I hope you've enjoyed this video and just getting to see and learn why the French way for staying slim is not actually something that should be romanticized. Instead, it's something that truly we should all be out there rejecting and instead focusing more on just being healthier and kinder to ourselves and less focused on trying to fit into some image that was created who knows when, and frankly probably was never even real. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to reading any of your thoughts in the comments. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you again soon. Bye.